Excuse me, Hunter.
Oh,
Apparently
whoa.
you're afraid of my words.
Whoa.
Here goes.
Oh.
I'd like to reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman.
Burst their bubble. Wow, that's too bad.
I think it's clear and obvious for everyone watching this hearing today that Hunter Biden is terrified of strong conservative Republican women because he can't even face my words as I was about to speak to him. What a coward. And this is also a coward that sat right here in front of Mickey Babbitt, Ashley Babbitt's mother, who was murdered on January 6th by Michael Byrd, the Capitol police officer. And you want to talk about a committee, a political sham? I'll totally disagree with you, Ms. Mace. That January 6th committee was not bipartisan. It was a complete setup to go after President Trump, go after Republicans, go after anyone that believes in free and fair elections, people that believe the Department of Justice should be fair and balanced, not a political weaponized department of the federal government that is targeting President Trump, his supporters, people that walked in the Capitol on January 6th, and now people that stood outside the Capitol. There's been no justice for Ashley Babbitt's family. Michael Byrd has never been charged with anything. He was let off and he was given a promotion and allowed to walk free. And Hunter Biden just walked out. That is an example of not following the law. Hunter Biden thinks he's above the law. Don Jr., Eric Trump, Ivanka, Trump family members had to come in to Democrat subpoenas and be questioned by Democrats for over 8 hours, each of them. Hunter Biden runs away. Hunter Biden did not come when we subpoenaed him. He did not follow the law. And then one of our colleagues helped him evade his subpoena by going and reserving a press conference for him on his behalf, helped him evade the subpoena, helped Hunter Biden break the law. Let's talk about his own father's words. President Joe Biden said in October 2021 that individuals who defy subpoenas from the January 6th House Select Committee should be prosecuted. And the Justice Department indicted Steve Bannon for doing so in November 2021. Hunter Biden's father, the President of the United States, said that he should be prosecuted. Anyone that defies a subpoena should be prosecuted. Hunter Biden didn't show up for his subpoena. Hunter Biden showed up today to make a clown show of himself, to show that he is nothing but someone that will not obey the law, that wants to show up when he wants to, and sits here with a smug look on his face and runs away when it's my turn to talk. Not only is he a criminal, but he is a coward. Nothing but a coward. Let's talk about voting for things. We have members on this committee that are on record on their own Twitter accounts talking about people blowing off subpoenas on the January 6th committee that states the rule of law is stirring all over America. That's Representative Jamie Raskin. Right here, I'll enter this for the record. Representative Jamie Raskin, Steve Bannon has been convicted of acting in contempt of Congress. My argument with Rep. Gates is now settled. If subpoenaed, you show up and assert any privilege you think applies to specific questions, but you can't blow off the proceeding. He blew it off. Walking in today is too late. We have to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress because he's not above the law, and neither is the President of the United States. And this committee has produced more evidence that any Democrat ever dreamed of having against President Trump and his family, while they constantly make up lies and attacks about the Trump family and President Trump. They make them up all day long. It's nothing but a political witch hunt. This committee has produced the evidence that Joe Biden has taken payments through his son, Hunter Biden, and all their dozens of fake LLCs. You can't buy a Biden product. You can't hire a Biden for a service unless you're a foreign country and you're asking and paying for political favors and political payouts. And that is exactly what the Biden brand is all about. We will hold Hunter Biden in contempt. And if the Democrats are not the hypocrites that they constantly display that they are, then they will vote for contempt of Congress because they voted for it on every other subpoena that didn't go through. And here's the last thing. You guys had your chance. If you wanted to hold people in contempt of Congress, you could have done it last Congress, but you didn't.
Article in the Epoch Times by Joseph Hanneman. Judge's latest refusal to grant bail looms large for January 6th defendant maced twice by D.C. jail guard. You know, having been a felony judge in Texas, handling, I don't know how many thousands of felony cases, nobody gets more incensed than I do when judges abuse their position. I recall having a bailiff. I found out that during recesses, he was trash-mouthing, talking terrible to people that I was sentencing. And when I found out, I called him in and said, look, I'm sentencing these people to prison. We are supposed to show the example of civility. When you trash talk somebody when they come into court, it builds up hatred and anger, and they seethe during the time they're in prison, and it makes them more likely to come back and recidivate. You know, there's no reason to do that. We're going to treat them civilly and fairly and make sure they're not abused, not verbally, not physically. And yet I see federal judges who seem to have the attitude that, gee, I am confirmed for life, so once I'm confirmed, I will do as I please and as I think I can get away with on appeal. And it's outrageous. So I'm encouraging my friends on the Judiciary Committee that there is such abuse by federal judges. There is such abuse by the DOJ and by the FBI adopting Gestapo tactics. They didn't used to act like that. I've had so many FBI agents tell me, you remember how it was in the 80s and 90s. We didn't go break down doors of people we knew would show up voluntarily if we just told them when and where. We didn't do it in the middle of the night to scare families and drag them out in their underwear and alert the news media so they'd be there to humiliate them. And yet, it's been going on. And people say January 6th and think that justifies the worst criminality by the Department of Justice and even federal judges. Because I do believe it is a breach of a federal judge's oath when they ignore due process requirements. And they take the position, I'm not going to do anything about somebody that's being abused in jail until I'm told to by an appellate court. So I'm hoping that the Judiciary Committee will even be subpoenaing judges to find out, not belabor specific cases, but to find out what their judicial philosophy is that allows them to avoid due process and to allow prisoners to be punished in pretrial confinement against the constitutional rights they have. What allows and provokes a federal judge to act like a dictator in their courtroom? Here's an example. I would not know U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan if he was here in the room, but I have read and heard firsthand from people who have had to deal with some of the injustice of him. And I know the federal judge that refused to recuse himself so he could sentence Dr. Simone Gold, even though he dated her and she wouldn't date him anymore. So he looked forward to abusing his position to sentence her as the first woman with no criminal record and only guilty of a misdemeanor trespass. He got to sentence the girl that quit going out with him, the woman, the brilliant lawyer and MD, to a maximum security facility down in Miami. He needs to come in and answer about recusal and who he thinks he is above the law that's in the law, that a judge must recuse himself or herself if there's even an indication there might be some impartiality there. We got a lot of cleaning up in the federal system to do, and I am glad that Republicans will be able to do that. The article points out, despite audio and video evidence showing former Tennessee Sheriff's Deputy Ronald Colton McAbee did not assault a police officer on the Capitol steps of January 6, as alleged by prosecutors, a federal judge again refused the defendant's motion to be released from the District of Columbia jail pending trial. The issue took on added urgency on September 5th when McAbee, 28, was twice assaulted with chemical spray by a guard in the District of Columbia jail for not wearing a COVID mask. His wife, Sarah, told the Epoch Times, "This is just inhumane," Sarah McAbee said. "Doesn't even matter what your political beliefs are. You should never treat somebody that way. Are we living in the same universe? This is not the America I once knew." McAbee is charged by federal prosecutors with 7 January 6 related crimes: assaulting, resisting, or impeding a federal officer, 2 counts of civil disorder, entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon, disorderly or disruptive conduct in a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon, engaging in physical violence in a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon, and committing an act of physical violence in the Capitol grounds or building. And that sounds horrible. But then when you find out that actually, if you listen to the audio as you watch the video, you find out he was helping a Capitol policeman who was down. And yet this judge has the audacity to say, we're not listening to the audio, so he could hear that evidence. Why wouldn't you listen to the evidence as well as watch a video that gives a false impression? Why? And then to chastise this guy and punish him even more because he was law enforcement. He should have known better than to assault a police officer, but he wasn't. Well, the judge doesn't want the facts to get in the way. He's too busy being a tyrant and punishing January 6 defendants while they're in pretrial and punishing them with pretrial. People need to answer for the tyranny of our justice system as it's become. And I have no problem, and I didn't as a judge, punishing people who deserve the punishment. And there were people January 6th that deserved to be punished. But it sounds like that corruption continues to grow in the DOJ, the FBI, and even in our judicial courts, federal courts. Tragic. He'd been pepper sprayed in the jail twice and was not allowed to clean it all off. It's a threat to his health. In a Oh, and by the way, this sat in front of the judge, the request for bail, 117 days. Now, in our state courts, we make sure somebody has a hearing. We used to, I'm sure they still do, within 48 hours. And if they had other evidence to bring in, we'd set a hearing and have that. But this judge had this matter sitting in front of him for 117 days while the prisoner was being abused in the D.C. jail, where there was a deputy warden that had tweeted out, "F the supporters of Trump." Well, she made sure what she tweeted was what was being done at the jail. So Judge Sullivan took 69 days after the hearing to issue a ruling on whether somebody should stay in jail or not. What kind of judge is that? And then he dismissed the new video and audio evidence, calling them ambiguities the court could not resolve. Well, apparently the only reason he had the hearing in the first place was because the U.S. Court of Appeals was going to require it if he didn't do it. So he did it, but grudgingly. But this matter had gone before a U.S. magistrate in Middle District of Tennessee, and he heard the evidence, saw the evidence, and he ordered McAbee to be released to home detention pending trial after hearings were had in August, early September 2021. That judge said, quote, "I do not believe that Mr. McAbee poses a future danger to the community if he were to be released between now and the time that he resolves this case. And the government, despite my request that they provide me any evidence that he's presented any sort of a danger to the community, have been able to point to absolutely nothing beyond the events around and during January 6th. Well, prosecutors knew they had to get that matter away from the judge in Tennessee, where there was more evidence of who McAbee really was to the core. So they got it up here to Judge Sullivan, who immediately rescinded that order and kept him in jail as punishment, despite the requirement to the contrary by the U.S. Constitution. It really is outrageous. You know, if a judge were deciding whether Judge Sullivan breached his sworn oath, that judge could say exactly what Judge Sullivan said to McAbee. Judge Sullivan said, "Someone tasked with enforcing the law has shirked that responsibility, and that's why they're dangerous." Well, it sounds kind of like that's where Judge Sullivan is. He has shirked his responsibility to the law and the Constitution, and that's why he's a dangerous judge. And I hope they'll have hearings and get to the bottom of what his problems are with following the Constitution. Now, last summer, well, there were a number of times I have met Pastor Tommy Nelson of Denton Bible Church in Denton, Texas. I've listened years ago to hours and hours of Bible study he did. I'm very impressed with him. I love the fact that he loves history so much, and he uses that as he speaks. And I'd heard him online doing sermons to his church, and he would kid and say, "And I'm going to include that when I get to speak to Congress someday." So I talked to Tommy, and I said, "Look, you know, you're not going to be able to come in and talk to Congress as Tommy Nelson, but I can pass on your messages." We quote people all the time. Put together what you think would be good to have Congress hear, and I'll deliver that.
lạnh lạnh buồn ơi, khuya nay anh đi rồi, bao nhớ nhung xa vời, ôi nói không nên lời để cạn niềm yêu mến anh. Phút gần gũi này thôi, khuya nay anh đi rồi, tay nắm tay không rời, mắt ngắm xa chân trời, mà lòng nghe nhớ thương hoài. Anh ơi chớ quên ngày mai đã có em chờ anh, chung xây đẹp ý đời. Tương lai e ấp trên môi, yêu nhau ta thầm nói, nụ cười trao duyên mới ước vọng để mà vui. Khuya nay anh đi rồi, đem chí trai xây đời, đem mến thương cho người người đợi chờ anh ơi. Phút gần gũi này thôi, khuya nay anh đi rồi, tay nắm tay không rời, mắt ngắm xa chân trời, mà lòng